everybody. Here I am with two amazing people, Dr. Dominique Morisano and Jessika Lagarde. Lovely to see both of you. I'd love to start off just with a recognition of where in the world we are right now. So I'm in cold New Jersey, Teaneck, about to jump on an aeroplane to England, if the aeroplanes are actually working today, because they have a little bit dodgy today. Whereabouts are you both? Maybe Jessika, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I'm currently based in Amsterdam. The weather here is also not so great right now. Really rainy days for a few weeks. My Brazilian soul is kind of missing some sunshine.
Thanks, Jessika.
Yeah, I'm in very foggy and cold Toronto, Canada, Toronto, Ontario. So
lovely to see both of you. So yeah, we've worked together, learned together, spent time together at conferences and through our Vital program. And this is a Vital Conversations podcast. So we're going to talk about Vital and how much we love it, but we're really here to talk about experience. What experiences help someone to understand psychedelics, to understand themselves, and to understand what they are able to offer people, or maybe not offer people. And I think before we jump into that subject of conversation, I'd like to ask both of you a question around kind of vital conversations, and what would you say right now are some of the most vital psychedelic conversations that we should be having? Jessika.
Yes, I can speak to that. I think from my personal and professional perspective of working here in the Netherlands, where it's one of the few countries in the world that it is actually legal to work with psilocybin truffles, I've been quite worried in this past year that psychedelics have become more mainstream, if you can say so. And there's a lot of people holding ceremonial spaces or doing sessions here that do not have much experience themselves with facilitating or space holding, but even experience with taking psychedelics. And I think it's very difficult because we are having a lot of people that are coming to these vulnerable spaces and are not necessarily going to get the right support before and after, or even during the ceremony. So for me, a vital conversation to have at this moment is how to bring more awareness to how to look for the right places or the right people in which you can trust to come and have an experience like that.
So experience is really important there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the most important conversations that I've been having lately about psychedelics, the ones that are kind of bringing up the most, passion, interest, curiosity, and concern, among people I know are around safety, like kind of like Jessica's referring to, like what are, safe conditions and what are the right conditions for providing, a safe space and setting and opportunity for people to start working on themselves with psychedelic medicines and psychedelic therapies. But the other thing that I have been thinking a lot about lately is the underbelly of this, with the the psychedelic renaissance and all of the positives of psychedelics being talked about, like this feeling like it's a miracle cure, and all you have to do is sit on a couch and take mushrooms and then you'll be cured of your treatment resistant depression or bipolar disorder or long-standing addiction or whatever. It's I think it's setting a lot of people up for disappointment and potential harm, and it's concerning to me at this point. I think I'm very hopeful and excited about the psychedelic world and psychedelic therapies, but I'm also very cognizant and aware of the potential pitfalls and the fact that they aren't for everybody, that that there are people that are going to have really challenging experiences, and we have to know as a society and culture, like, how to navigate those experiences and what resources we want to offer people, and how, and also, you know, kind of along that line, how do we set people up to realize that working with psychedelic assisted medicines can be hugely beneficial, but it's also work. You know, it's also about, like, facing difficult parts of yourself. It's about facing difficult, different realities, different truths, um, and people have to be prepared to be working on things when they leave the office or the ceremonial space or wherever they're doing, you know, working with these medicines. Like, one of my teachers has said, you know, the ceremony begins when you leave the door, you know, when you exit the ceremony, when you know, so that's what I've been thinking a lot about lately as a vital conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for dropping that one. Yeah. And, you know, just talking about the macro, like the systems that we're part of, you know, the trends that we're seeing. And you were just saying, Dominique, around having that inner work aspect and really being tuned into yourself. We could think about, you know, self-care, for example, as something that's really important. What would either of you say on that personal level, looking at a therapist, practitioner, space holder, guide, coach, whatever they call themselves, whatever the role they've got, what would be perhaps the most vital lesson they would need to learn to do their work safely or competently? And it's going to look different for different folks in different countries, offering different services with different medicines. So it's not like one thing perhaps it's going to apply to everyone, but maybe there is. Is there anything in particular that really resonates on that kind of personal level that someone needs experience or skills in order to do this work?
Yeah, from a personal perspective and also from working in several group ceremonies and retreats around here, I've noticed how important it is actually as a practitioner to be trauma-informed. A lot of people that are coming into the space to take the medicine and to, you know, seek for healing, they do have a history of trauma. And what I've noticed is how important to make sure that people are not getting re-traumatized in medicine spaces, and how we can show up in a way that they can perhaps, you know, experience a safer container or more connection that they felt that they could not experience before, and just have a different response to what was in the past a traumatic experience that can be triggered in that moment. So I would say, like, it's really vital for a practitioner to have an understanding of trauma or to have any sort of trauma-informed training.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we often talk about trauma-informed, but we don't talk about what that really means. Like, what it means to be trauma-informed and what makes someone trauma-informed. You know, I think one of the most vital characteristics of a good guide or therapist or facilitator would be the ability to kind of safely and effectively lead a psychedelic session across a range of potential outcomes. So, I know many folks, many facilitators that are, have never had a bad experience with a client, like have never seen someone have a tough experience, have never navigated, someone, vomiting, let's say, like throughout a session, or never navigated someone having a panic attack, or, feeling suicidal, or, feeling very dark, or, feeling very paranoid. And I would want to know, and a lot of, I've met facilitators that actually don't really know that is an outcome, which, like, speaks to your earlier point, Jessika, of like people, kind of starting to do this work after a couple of experiences, and not really understanding the full gamut of what this kind of work can entail, and the ability. So I think the ability to kind of really be with and sit with dark and difficult experiences is key. And I think that's part of why, for better, for worse, that, therapists have really been, called upon to do this work with people, like psychotherapists, like licensed therapists, because one of the basic criteria of being a licensed psychotherapist is the ability to sit with dark, difficult material, right? And so, like, a lot of people, it's not all rainbows and butterflies and seeing the heavens. It can be really dark, gritty, hard, challenging stuff. And are you going to be okay with working with that? And are you going to be able to kind of guide someone through that and navigate that, without losing your cool, without, turning on all the lights, take off that eye mask, like, let's stop the music, like, it's going to be, are we going to be able to navigate that with ease and care and maturity and stability and strength? Because the client in a vulnerable state, on psychedelics is going to be very sensitive to how you handle a situation. So that's why, I think like Jessika kind of was referring to before, having lots of experience, like having lots of practice, like co-facilitating, watching, observing, being in session, having your own experience with alternate states of consciousness ahead of time, so that you can know, at least for yourself, where the mind goes is key.
Love it. Okay, now we've got stuff out on the table. We can dissect some of this. What does make a good practitioner, and how much do we need to learn the clinical psychological aspects and be able to work around mental health and trauma as it comes up? And I think a lot of that answer depends on, well, who are we? Why do we want to do this work? Where do we live? What's our job going to be like? What's our role? What's our intention? So that's a big part of it. I want to focus just right now on experience with psychedelics. Is that important? And I keep thinking about the Jimi Hendrix song, Are You Experienced? I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but do you want to be experienced? And I think a lot of folks, and you were talking about it, Jessika, have psychedelic experiences that are profound, and some of those butterflies do fly around, Dominique, and they think, oh, I'm going to start a healing center, I'm going to go and do this and heal the world. And okay, so for me, a bit of a warning sign would be that someone's not ready is if they're just rushing. Like, okay, I'm now going to be the leader of this retreat center or this practice or this community, like kind of guru,
There's like an urgency, right? Like, I've got to do this now. Like, I've got the call. I got to go to start my center in Peru,
Yeah, and I think it's good to acknowledge that. So I have that part of me that wants to do all those things as well, kind of grandiose. And then that other part's like, well, hang on a second. I'm not ready for that. That's just one of those fanciful dreams, So it's somewhere in there. So just talking about experience then. Should a psychedelic-informed practitioner, however you define that, have experiences with psychedelics? Should it be a prerequisite? Is it helpful? What are some of our thoughts, I wonder?
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, if you are doing this work in a country in which you do have certain legal advantages towards working with psychedelics, if you don't have any sort of medical condition that would stop you from having experiences yourself, from my side, I would think like, I would never go scuba diving with a diver who didn't get experience diving, or board on an airplane with a pilot who didn't have any sort of flight instruction, and
had never flown or had never been on a plane, right? Like, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, if you are given these right conditions of being in a country that you are not risking losing your license, or you're not putting yourself in danger for having experience with the substance, for me, I find it essential because it kind of complements the work that you're doing. You know how to navigate the terrain because you have been there before. You are aware of all the layers of your inner landscape and how these layers can be presented when you are having a psychedelic experience yourself. And from my own experience, this has been very helpful when it comes to sitting with other people and holding space for their own, even challenging experiences. Yes, that's how I would phrase it.
Yeah, I think like this question is always interesting because there's so many different factors to it, right? Like there's one, like the fact that, you know, they're predicting that we're going to need so many psychedelic therapists, like when these medicines become legal globally, you know, like, or like, you know, what is it gonna be to qualify as someone that can work with these medicines with people, right? Like, what are the minimum criteria? And, you know, I know that, you know, I've heard in the field that there's, you know, there's fears like from people that are educators or, you know, running educational programs that like, we're not going to be able to keep up with the demand. Like, and then if you start adding all these criteria, like, oh, you have to have used this medicine or before, you know, is that adding a block? Is that adding like a door? At the same time, you know, my parents were both psychologists. You know, I was raised in a very psychological household, for better, for worse. And, you know, my mom always taught me, you know, never trust a therapist that hasn't done therapy, you know, and, you know, that stuck with me big time, you know, and even when I was in grad school, you know, there was a lot of us that did therapy and some of us that didn't, you know, and it's interesting, right? Like, you know, why do you want to do this for other people if you haven't had this experience? Like, why would you, like, what makes you think that this would be good for other people but not for you? And like, where's that blinder on, you know? And then if you do think it's good for other people but not for you, like, what are your motivations for doing this kind of work? And, you know, to me, like, I always asked, like, you know, there was a period where I was at you know, working at a big psychedelics company. I was interviewing a lot of therapists for, you know, for positions, and like hundreds and hundreds. And, one of the questions I would always ask is like, do you have experience with psychedelics? Because I was working with we were working with ketamine, you know, primarily. And I said, have you experience with ketamine? You know, if they said no, then I would say, okay, no problem. Like, are you open to that?
Mm-hmm.
And if they said, yeah, we'd keep going. If they said no, I would say, oh, that's so interesting. So like, what do you think about, why do you want to work in this field? Like, what's, you know, because let's face it, like, when you're a client and like a therapist or facilitator, like there's a power differential, like, you know, like whether you want to recognize it or not, it exists, you know. And you can be, you know, feminist practitioner, you can be someone that sets it up so that there's, you know, a quality there, but there is an inherent vulnerability in being the one to take a psychedelic substance, you know, and be in front of someone that isn't, you know, in the same way that when you're going into an office to share your problems with a therapist and that therapist is not sharing their problems with you, there's also a vulnerability, right? And a power differential. So, and I would say when you take a psychedelic substance, we know that psychedelics are amplifiers, like they amplify whatever is going on in a particular situation. That amplifies the vulnerability. And so it's like, why do you want to be in a room with someone in an amplified state of vulnerability, but you're not willing to go there yourself, you know? And if they said, oh, well, I have this medical condition that prohibits me from doing this or I have that, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, you know, but it really helped my brother or it really helped my son. Okay, you know, now we're talking, you know, like now we're like, okay, you know, but if we're starting to think about, then I would say, well, have you experienced any other alternate states of consciousness? Like maybe not psychedelics, but have you ever traversed, you know, a different state of mind other than the one that gets up, goes to work, you know, makes dinner, watches a TV show and goes to bed, you know? And if people said, oh, you know what, I've experienced, I don't know, getting, doing like when I'm dancing really hard for a long time, like, you know, I've gotten into an alternate state, or I've spent time in meditation retreats and wow, did I get into some deep inner work in those meditation retreats, or actually like, an interviewee that told me that she was a long distance runner and, got into a very alternate state of consciousness when running past 50 miles, as I'd imagine you would have to. And I said, wow, that's something I've never experienced, like that's pretty interesting. The only other factor that often comes up when I think of this though, and Jessika, you touched on this a little bit, is like, because you said like, I know the terrain, I would know the terrain. And the only thing I would argue is that, like, do you know the terrain? And like, if let's say you've taken ketamine once and you're doing 6 sessions of ketamine with a client, do you really know what they're going to be experiencing? And like, can you have had the full range of experience? And like, some people say, oh, you know what, you need to have done this 10 times, or you need to have done this, like 5 times or 30 times, or like, and like, how do we define this? Like, where do we, because I can tell you, you have 100 psychedelic experiences, most likely you're going to have a different experience each time, and a different connection to inner or outer terrain, or, different realms, or different ways of thinking and being. So when is enough? When did you learn your lesson? When did you gain the experience necessary to navigate someone else? Because if you took ketamine, for instance, and then had like a dreamy somatic state, which like is pretty common in ketamine, just like you're very relaxed, tranquilized, maybe you're thinking happy thoughts, and then you work with someone that has done ketamine and became a wolf in their session and has to navigate like a transpersonal experience of being a wolf, are you able to help them because you had a dreamy experience with ketamine? Maybe, but that's where also like training comes in, and reading and understanding, and like experience and observing and being around these states for a long time.
Yeah, most definitely. I would say we are going back again to what you mentioned in the beginning, right? Experience, and experience. I think like bringing up different ways of experiencing an outer state that doesn't involve taking drugs, for example, is one great way of like, being in those spaces and see what are the different ranges of experiences that can come up for people, and observing, learning from people that have been doing this work for quite some time. All of that can complement, but I fully agree with you. It's very difficult to know, what can happen, and if you are really prepared for that. And I think that's oftentimes like in this work why we can make mistakes as well, and we learn on the go. And at least that's also how it was for me with facilitating and sitting for other people. There were things that in the moment I reacted or hold a space in a certain way that later on I was like, oh, I wish I've done this differently. But it was that moment that actually enabled me today to have a different way of holding that situation. So we are back to the experience.
Totally. Yeah. You're definitely going to learn every time you sit with someone,
Yes. And you learn. You learn a lot about yourself as well. I find in the end of the day, right, every journey is also a journey for the facilitator, and we are constantly mirrors to each other. So it's a very interesting work to do in that sense as well, because your own work is continuously being done, your own inner work.
Exactly. Yeah, I think in experience, like in working with different people and different clients, you start to realize, your own capacity for different things as a facilitator. You start to realize, just because I can do this, or I have the capacity to do this, should I do this? You realize like less is often more in a situation. And, I've had experiences in the past where, I've really sat through sessions, just really kind of like, not to be cliche, but like holding the space, like sitting there trying to be really present to a client's experience, be there if anything comes up. and many sessions where I've had no, physical contact with somebody, even though it's, it's welcome offered to like have a hand, hold a hand, put a hand on the shoulder, that's always discussed and, consented to or not consented to ahead of time, for if that's going to be a part of it. But I also, had experiences in the past where, I felt like I had the capacity. I really wanted to help. I really wanted to help somebody. And, I had the capacity to hold their hand, for a long, long time, like 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and I could do it. I did it, I did it. And then, wow, was I massively impacted by that later. I was so drained. I took on so much in that effort that it made it harder for me to, do my day the next day and be super present the next day. I'm a person that's pretty, I would say, sensitive, pretty energetically sensitive, if you want to say that, if that doesn't sound too woo. And so it's a lot. Like you put out a lot of yourself in ceremonies, in many ceremonies, or you can stay really distant in ceremonies and not connect with people. And that also has an impact on their experience and the outcomes, so this is all to say, like, I think we know so much, but we also know so little about this work. There's so many people that we have to learn from, like indigenous practitioners, indigenous medicine people that have been working with these medicines for so long, have so many basics about behavior and how to work with things that we in the West are just like, oh wow, what? Oh, you do that? Oh, like I didn't know, or we didn't learn that in school, but it's like basic considerations, basic things. Well, it's like, of course you don't. You're not necessarily gonna, I don't know, touch someone in that instance, or I don't know. I just think we have so much to learn. And I've gone to school for psychedelic therapies for like multiple years now. I've been taking training after training, learning after learning. I've, been involved in so many experiences. I've helped with facilitating, CAP sessions and other sessions in different countries. And, I feel like the learning is endless. It's never ending. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how I feel like you're in the right path, because it's the same for me. And I think it's really complicated if a practitioner thinks I know enough or I know everything. Right. That would be something that I would be worried about. But especially regarding this work, it's never the same. 2 sessions are never the same. And even how you show up on that day for that session, or how, setting, all of that, it influences. So we have to constantly be placing ourselves between being a student, also a teacher sometimes, but never put ourselves in a spot that we think okay, now I know everything that can.
I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm done. I'm healed. I'm healed, and now I'm here to heal others. It's an evolution, right? I think of it as an evolution of souls. How are we evolving our souls? How are we evolving our persons? With this work.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily a one and done.
Yeah, I love that evolution of souls.
Yeah.
Thank you, you two. My job is really easy today. That was awesome. And I'm hearing both of you saying, self-awareness is really key. And that could mean different things at different times. But one of those parts of our self-awareness is knowing kind of our limitations. Like, I know nothing, or I can do that for you, David, but I can't do that. That's just beyond my confidence, or this week's just not right for me, or maybe in a year's time, or maybe when this law changes, or, just knowing what are my limitations is really key. And I get asked all the time to hold space or to hook people up for medicine. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry, because it's just to think that through. And I want to share a quick story, and then I want to ask...
why do you say no?
Why do I say no? Well, one of those reasons is I've got a license as a clinical social worker
Exactly.
And I'm a green card holder, so I'd probably be booted out of the country. And
exactly.
My family rely on me, so there's all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm an Orthodox Jew as well, so my little kind of bubble where I live in Jersey, that would not look too good if that gets into the local Jewish newspapers.
Right. Yeah. We're at the beginning. Like, I mean, we're not at the beginning. We're like in our Western adaptation of what we think these practices are, what's coming through the the teachings that are spreading across. Like, this is, we're at the beginning, we're this, what I can't just go get ibogaine out at a clinic right now. And no, like I sat at a panel a few years ago for a documentary in Toronto, and someone in the audience was like, "Oh, this sounds great. Can I go get some ibogaine? Where can I go? Is there who offers it in Toronto?" And I was like, "Oh no, we're like pretty far from. I mean, you go to Africa, like you go to Mexico, yeah. But Toronto, no can do. So it's like there's like a lot of over promising, a lot of under delivering, a lot of over promising expectation building, and people are like, wait. I know so many people that I've talked to that like, what? Mushrooms aren't legal? No, they're not. Like, unless, I mean, in Canada, if you have access to like a special access program, your physician has been willing to like fill it out. That this is like a last resort treatment. You've tried everything else. You're in these dire straits. Then you can potentially get a license for that. There's some exemptions, but other than that, yeah, it's not legal. I'm going to be doing psilocybin therapy in a research study as part of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and it's funded by Health Canada, like coming up this spring. And so I'll be doing it legally in that context, but it's a research study, and there's also placebo component where there'll be people that aren't on psilocybin as well. So. Yeah, we've got a long way to go.
I want to come back to that question of experience that we were riffing on a while back. And I was asked a question when I was interviewing for a job with Compass Pathways a couple of years ago, because it was for a training role. Do you think that facilitators should have experience with psychedelics? And I hadn't prepared that question, but my gut answer was, Yeah, I do. It's something I actually think is really important, and I would only feel comfortable working with someone that had that experience. And they're great people I was interviewing with, but they kind of had their official response was like, "Oh, oh no," like that. That's not our official policy. Like, that's not something that we encourage, and that obviously. And I understand you can't say that every clinician needs to have had experiences with psilocybin or whatever for various reasons. But there was also that part of me that felt a bit of shame answering that in that positive way, because it was what I believed in. But I also was thinking, I'm not fitting into this little more clinical trial reality and paradigm that they're coming from, and I understand that, but I really do believe it's so helpful having familiarity with those states, just to get a sense of like, what does it feel like? Yes, the craziness, the lack of control, and the challenge around surrendering to those experiences. So I wanted to see for you, Jessika, you mentioned earlier you would like to share some of your own experiences with psychedelics and how that has been part of, kind of your journey getting to where you are now and offering this work and in your own healing work. So how would you say, looking back, your own experience has framed who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, David, basically, the way I grew up was believing that drugs are bad. I had a mother who suffered with drug addiction her entire life. So also coming from the context of my country in Brazil, in which you really see the huge impacts of, the drug war. At first, it was something that I didn't, like, I was like, any sort of drugs, even, psychedelic drugs, because I don't separate them in different boxes. For me, it's all the same. it was never something that I felt called to, because I felt like these are wrong and these are bad things, until I moved to the Netherlands and I encountered drugs, truffles, psilocybin truffles. They were actually my first experience. And that started a whole process of like, wait a minute, this is not what I was taught it was. And like, while I was having more and more experiences, even in recreational contexts here, I was seeing that slowly everything I thought I knew was not exactly what I was experiencing in my life when I was having, these different experiences. And yeah, for me, it took me like about 2 years after, having mainly recreational use with friends and going to festivals and parties, to actually start to see that, oh, there's even more to these substances that I thought it was. And as I started to use psychedelics in a more intentional way, if you can say so like that, or for healing purposes, including even to, work with the trauma that I had regarding my own mother that had problems with drugs. It really was a big shift for me. It changed my whole life in ways that I had so many internal conflicts back then, because I felt like, okay, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm getting so much out of this. And it helped me so much on my self-expression and re-understanding of things that I felt like were in a certain way, but actually they were not. So much to the point that I started working with psychedelics myself, and I started to hold space for other people. And nowadays, this is my main job here. So my own experiences, they really inform me to be where I am today. And they really, they made a difference for me into see, psychedelics and drugs and what they are, for what they are, which are merely tools that we can use in different ways. And what matters is our relationship towards them and the intention we put when we make use of them, and not so much about what they are by itself and if they are bad or good.
Thanks for sharing that, Jessica. Did you want to jump in, Dominique?
Well, I would just say, I would say in some cultures, like, we may see them as tools, and, in other cultures, I think, I'm reading this old classic book, like Plants of the Gods, and, there's also the idea that many cultures don't believe that they're just tools, but they believe that they're actual sacraments, means to communicate with, God, or like spirits, or other kind of connections to different realms, and so I think also how we define plants or drugs or medicines or substances, or or psychedelics, like it's all an interesting conversation that I think it's another vital conversation.
For sure.
Yeah.
We got more. There's plenty more to come. Let's have a think about, okay, so maybe not psychedelics should or could be helpful for someone who wants to work with them. What might be some other experiences that could help a person to have familiarity with other states of consciousness on one level, and secondly, just to be a better practitioner, or on another level, simply just to be a better human being, like a happier person or a more well-integrated, grounded person? Because for me, what I've found from being part of Vital, our course, is that there's not actually that much difference between being a student, an instructor, or a patient, a client. Kind of, they're working with psychedelics. There's a lot of shared experiences and a lot of shared kind of processes and kind of moments of awarenesses and realities that are just purely human. And is something that I'm really trying to figure out, and that's one of my realizations from last year's kind of Vital, is how much of it's just about being human and the different levels of human existence that we're trying to kind of go deeper into and have more compassion around self and other, to interact, engage, connect with other on those different levels and realms. So what might be, other than psychedelics, something else that we think can help a person to explore that, familiarize, and kind of open up to those parts of self in service of others?
Yeah.
The only thing.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, when you kept saying human, David, I was thinking about like this photo I recently saw. You know, which you've probably seen before, of like this like brown bear like just scarfing down Amanita muscaria, like the red mushrooms with the white dots, you know, like, and there's like an old picture from, I don't know if it's like Discovery or National Geographic, of dolphins like passing around a blowfish, you know, but yeah, the human experience. Yeah, go for it, Jessica.
That was a nice tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen both. Wait, I lost my. Okay. Yeah, I think like even picking up from what you just said, David, I think like talking about the Vital course, for example, it has been for me an incredible experience in terms of like, how to find community and more people that are working in this space, and also like what are the processes they are going through, not just in a professional level of doing this work in so many different ways, because we have people from all sorts of different backgrounds, but also like seeing that, how they show up for our study groups and how they show up in vulnerability, how we are there to do a check-in with each other and actually learn the stories of one another. And I felt like for me, this was also one of the main key things that I loved about this, almost getting to the final core of the course, but how I got to know more people in the space, and who are these people in a deeper layer. Besides that, I think like just coming into life experiences in general, I find like family dynamics, or like becoming a parent, or even dealing with grief and loss. These are all experiences that take us out of our, normal day-to-day life, or like really shake us to the core in a way that like you need to learn who you are in the case of death, like who you are without that person. Or when you become a mother, for example, who am I now that I am a mother? So there is often like this questioning, or like putting up big questions there. Or anytime we have like a big life transition, I would say is also an example of that, because we need to find ourselves out of the comfort zone and facing the fear of uncertainty and of the unknown. And this, for me, is very similar when we are in a psychedelic experience, to do some sort of inner work. And with motherhood or with grief, these are also situations in which, not motherhood, I did not experience that yet, but I have worked with many mothers so far. And I know that there is also this sense of like redefining who you are, or kind of relearning who you are now after this big event happened to you. So,
yeah, with everything, like, I mean, it makes me think about like why I enjoy living in Canada so much, because we get like these big snowstorms and blizzards sometimes that just are kind of unexpected, and they just knock everyone on their, like off their, it's like, oh my gosh, we have to rethink how we're doing things. We actually have to be present now to like how we're going to, are we going to have running water? Are we going to have power? Are we going to be able to get to work today? Are we going to, and it kind of stops people and makes them think, kind of consider how they're going about things and appreciate the things that they have in their regular life. But I was just going to say, like, in general, I think when you're working to help other people, when you're working to, extend any kind of hope, like the way that you develop wisdom. Like, I was talking about this with a client this morning, was like how do you develop wisdom? The way to develop wisdom is through experience and often pain, right? Like, and so, when practitioners or facilitators or guides or whatever you want to call it, have experiences, and they've not just had them, but they've been able to navigate them, they've been able to work through them, they've addressed them, if I was a client, or if I was like a participant, that would make me feel safer. Oh, you've gone here before, you've navigated something before. Years ago, I had a pretty bad concussion, and I was working with a sports medicine doctor, and we were going well. Things were going well. He was helping me, and then he got a bad concussion all of a sudden, randomly, like one day, and it was super upsetting. I felt so terrible for him, but I will say that when he worked through that and started to like overcome the concussion, he became a better doctor for me, and I think like that's the thing when we experience, like when Jessika was saying, when we experience big things, when we have to move through things, when we experience difficult situations, and we actually have to learn how to navigate them. I lost my father about 10 years ago now, 10 and a half years ago. And, at the time that I was experiencing like the most acute impacts of grief, I found it difficult to talk to anybody that hadn't lost a parent before, because I said that you don't really understand me, unless you've lost a parent before, and my older brother is a paramedic, and he said to me, it's really hard for people in emergency medicine to, firefighters, police, paramedics, to work with therapists that haven't actually been in emergency medicine, that actually haven't, been a paramedic before, been in the police force before, been a firefighter, like, because it just is so, it's almost so unknowable, it's so in the response to the humanity, David, like as a practitioner, going out there, like putting yourself out there in the world, engaging with the world, having experiences, living life. Like if you, are someone that lives a pretty, I don't know, let's say like a narrower life in some ways, like you're not engaged in much, you're not doing much, you're not seeing many people, you're not having many experiences, like it's probably going to be difficult for other people to relate to you, and for you to relate to them, and to help them navigate the varied experiences of life. But the more that you go out there, have different experiences, like have practice navigating difficult situations, the more you're going to be able to help others that have those. You can read all about it, in your textbooks, but if you've never, navigated before, having a family member with cancer, or having, someone like a loved one who's experienced addiction, or, or I don't know, like the myriad of life problems that, or having, someone close, like go to, I don't know, go through incarceration, or, if you've never been confronted with those things in your life in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be difficult to understand and empathize with, and navigate someone through.
Yeah, I think like even we can pick one shared experience that we all had very recently, right? With the global pandemic, which I think is a great example of that, because it kind of, it picked everybody, and it took us out of our everything that we knew, or what we thought we knew, and we suddenly had to deal with this collective grief, not of in the sense of like people dying just, but also like the way we used to live our lives, so the way we would connect with each other. And for me, the whole pandemic was a psychedelic experience by itself, in comparison to, these different points, and bring all this fear and not knowing what's coming next. But it was a very interesting experience because we were globally, for the first time in a really long time, living through something together.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of our experiences individually as being almost kind of war wounds, or having been on the battlefield of life, and kind of our inner battlefield, but also, collectively, that it feels like there is a battle raging in the world right now, and there's a lot of suffering, and the ability to kind of sit with that and not run away from it, not to numb ourselves from it. Do we have that ability to sit with our own pain, fear, restlessness, or do we run away from it? And definitely on the collective level, like the way the world is looking, can we face that? And sitting with another person in a room, especially for 6 hours or 8 hours, can I do that? Can I really be present with this person for that long? And for me personally, I don't know if I can. I still don't know. I'm thinking about it. I do want to do the MAPS training. Ketamine, I can definitely do that. I can definitely be present for 2 hours, but 6-8 hours, I don't know. I don't think I've got maybe the mental skills or the physical ability to do that, and I can tag team in and out. But and I think that's why things like meditation and mindfulness skills, even yoga, can be really helpful things for getting that anchor.
Being able to go for a walk, I know so many people that can't go for a walk, and it's like, oh, well, what do you do on the walk? Well, you just walk. You just walk around the city, just like walk, It's like,
Why?
I was talking to my mom earlier, and she was telling me about how she fastidiously walks 50 minutes a day, every day, in the same place, right? So like basically in the same loop, and I'm like, oh, that, does that, like, how do you experience that? Like, does that get boring for you ever? Does, like, what do you do when you walk? Like, and she said, oh, sometimes I listen to like meditation. Sometimes I listen to Tara Brach, sometimes I just walk, and she's like, sometimes it does get difficult. Sometimes sometimes it is hard to just kind of be and walk, but she's like, I think it's important to move through that and sit with that and just go and just keep going, be with the difficulty and keep going, experiencing it, navigating it, we run away from everything. Even like reading a book, was so easy for so many folks, I think, like when they were kids, or, when they were in high school, or, and now it's like so hard to sit down for so many people and read a book. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It's just the way we've developed as a society. I think as a culture, like, we run from things. It's so much easier to go to a screen or to, look at constant content scrolling, than to sit still and read a page, because it's like different, different reward, activities happening in the brain. Like we're just not accustomed to it anymore. And even the ability to sit there, or like sit at a traffic light and not pick up your phone and look at it. Like people can't even sit for, and this isn't a judgment. This is just a note. I understand why it's so hard, and so if we can't do that, if we can't do the little things, then how can you sit for 6 to 8 hours with someone while they're going through a big experience and you're not, like that's a real skill and capacity, something you have to build also. Like, I mean, David, I have no doubt that you could do it, but it would just take practice, and building I think you've hit it, I think the meditation is key, like being able to sit for, if you can't sit for 10 minutes, likely you can't sit for 6 hours, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dominique. Agreed. So, there was one thing I'm just looking, I think part of it was, how a person can identify their specific role, function, kind of place in the field, like through tuning into themselves. Like, and it depends on where they live and training and things like that. But just how to know, like, who am I, and how do I do my work, frame it. Yeah.
One key thing that I think is really important for practitioners and facilitators and, guides, coaches, practitioners in general, one thing that they should consider is being able to really understand their own capacity, skills and limits. Like maybe, they would be great working with this particular population, with this particular gender, with this particular, people of a certain profession, of people from a certain background, with specific, maybe they'd feel more comfortable working with people with specific mental health issues and not other mental health issues, but starting to understand am I, just because I do this or just because this is part of my job, like now it's becoming a job. Like Jessika said, this is my job now. Like I'm a facilitator, for psilocybin truffles. That's become, that's okay. Well, like, great. Now there's going to be people with jobs in the Western world. Like, how do we navigate that? And when you get people coming to your door and, calling you, like, David, you say, oh, people call me all the time, say, can you sit for me? And I say, no, I can't. A, it's not legal. B, I don't know if I would even want to if it was legal, and like knowing your own capacity. And B, it's like, if someone's coming to me, for ketamine therapy, which I do, and they're saying my primary issue is, I don't know, borderline personality disorder, or some other personality disorder, and I say, well, gosh, I know that there are practitioners that are able to navigate, like that work with personality disorders in general, that work with personality disorders without psychedelics, and have started to integrate this into their psychedelic work, like working with personality disorders. I would feel more comfortable referring you to this person who has experience doing this in regular practice, because any issue that you're going to be experiencing in day-to-day life is probably going to be amplified in a psychedelic experience. And so if you as a practitioner don't have the capacity or the skills or the knowledge to navigate a particular condition without psychedelics present, for better or for worse, like it's probably going to be very difficult, challenging, and potentially harmful to try to navigate that experience or a person with that condition's experience with psychedelics. People just saying, oh, well, I know how to sit with someone on mushrooms. Now I'm going to help someone cure their 20-year battle with alcoholism. But I've never worked with alcoholism. I don't know anyone with alcoholism. I've never experienced alcoholism, and I'm not quite sure what's involved in that, but I think I can do it, like, so knowing, like, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should step back. Maybe I should, refer this person to having someone with more experience in working with addictions or, working with alcohol issues. So just kind of being able to check yourself, like, and I think, Jessika, I would like to hear what you have to say, because I would also like to follow up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like right now, for example, here in the Netherlands context, I do have the advantage of like choosing who I want to work with. It's not like a medical doctor in which you have like different patients that come to your room and they have all sorts of concerns. But here I can actually choose to work with clients that I know I can support them on the best possible way, or that they have had similar life experiences to mine, or that they are people that I, basically know I will be able to support their process and support their journeys. So, for example, I'm not comfortable working with someone who has an eating disorder because I do not have experience and need the training on cognitive behavior therapy, for example, to give the right support to this person. So best for me, it would be then to redirect this person to someone who does have the training. And it is not much or not at all about like just taking any client and anybody to do this work because you have to help everybody, but mostly like really know who you can actually help and when you are actually doing good there or you're going to cause more harm. So knowing your limitations, exactly like you said, and who you are comfortable working with, these are really, I think, also keys, to be a good practitioner.
Right. Yeah. And like, I don't like, as a psychologist, you know, I would say there's, a couple things that I wouldn't put on the top of my list of like having skills to work with either. And, with my particular background and training, like I have, a special training in addictions. I have special training with trauma. Like I work with a lot of addiction and trauma. Sometimes that, that overlaps with, eating disorders, which I don't have specialized training in. Right. And there was one point where I was asked to be a study therapist on a trial, with psychedelics and eating disorders. And oh, there was part of me that was so excited. I was like, oh gosh, I've been wanting to do psychedelic therapy legally, like with this particular medicine for so long. Oh, this is a clear opportunity. I could just say yes. But then the other part of me was like, come on, you don't have training you don't have specialized training with eating disorders. So you would not be a good person for this study, so even though you have training in psychedelics and you have training in trauma, that doesn't necessarily translate to being able to, work with eating disorders in amplified states, and so I said, no, I can't do it. With the trial that I'm going to be working on coming up, it's for clients with depression. Well, that's something I work with all the time, with or without, psychedelics, so that to me felt like something I was very, comfortable with and would be able to navigate, and even in an amplified state. So yeah, knowing your capacities and your limits is key.
Always is, just in all parts of life. Yeah, 100%. Jessika, I think we're almost at the kind of out of time, but Jessika, I really wanted to talk about the experience that you've had, working in a retreat center, working with folks coming from around the world, particularly fellow students that were part of the Vital cohort that you're part of, coming to Amsterdam and having, a 5-6 day retreat together using psilocybin truffles. So just to tell folks, so yes, Jessika's a student and also held space and was part of the organization in the Netherlands doing that. And we have that as one of the aspects of our 12-month training, that it's either breath work or some other medicine that gives experience holding space and going into your own space with non-ordinary states of consciousness. So what was that like for you, both kind of as a student with your peers, but also as someone kind of working with a team, and how did you juggle that a little bit? But also, what did you notice, like, were the skills there kind of being present during those 5-6 days?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because for me, it was the first time that I had kind of like this dual role. Like, I am here as a student of this course, and these are all my peers. But at the same time, I'm helping create this container. I'm co-hosting this retreat. And yeah, it was interesting just to jog around both of these roles. Like, for me, I was really excited because a lot of the people that came to this retreat in Amsterdam were people that were in my study group. So people that I have been seeing every week for many months. And like, I felt this was going to be something special because we are connected, but in a way we have never met in person. And I think, like, yeah, we can all agree that we have been missing a lot of in-person things. It's great that we can have all these calls and do all of that online, but when it comes to being there and being with each other, it's a whole different experience. So when the other students from Vital came to here for the retreat, it was the most interesting retreat experience I ever had. And perhaps it was because everyone is already doing this work in one way or another. But we had like ketamine therapists, but we had also people that sit with ayahuasca. We had people that are doing this work, like me here in the Netherlands with psilocybin. But we also had people that were coming to have the experience for the first time. So it was interesting to see how we could all apply what we already know from our own personal and professional experiences, but also everything we have learned in the past months from the training. And that we could also talk about, the things we have learned during the training and how we could apply that in creating this ceremonial container, because we had half of the group was journey and the other half was holding space for them. And on the next day, we did the other way around. So it was interesting to see how this space was created in such a special way, like I never had before in a retreat. And I do think this happened because of like all the time that we have been together, that we have been going into difficult conversations at times, or like being really open and doing these check-ins during our study groups. And I feel like that whole thing made a difference for how the retreat play out, and the general outcome of the experience. So for me, it was a really special opportunity to be here and help co-host the retreat, but also to actually meet the people that I've been talking with for months in a row, and actually see how we can create this together, and how we can have like again people from all sorts of backgrounds that don't necessarily have a clinical background or a degree in psychology, and they are doing incredible work. And what are the different ways of holding space, and what are the different toolkits that each person have, and how can we bring that all together and create this thing that is unique? And that doesn't mean one way is better than the other, but that are just different ways of doing this work. So it was very interesting for me to be able to see that and learn from each other, this time in person.
Yeah, especially the
Can I
piece
ask you a
around.
question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Do you feel like, because there's something to that, when it's an interesting training model, right?
Yeah.
To have people practicing sitting with psilocybin trussels, like facilitating, in a kind of a supervised context, with their peers, as a way to kind of gain experience in that. When I did my training at CIS, well, at California Institute of Integral Studies, some years ago, they, one of the first things they had us do was start to role play, like what it would be like if someone was pretending to be on psilocybin and like listening to the playlist, and like, we'd pretend like we'd do go through the whole thing, sitting there, holding space, asking questions. If some people would have real experiences without much, without taking a substance, just listening to the music, being supported. But I also went to Synthesis in the Netherlands, to do a practicum, as part of my program there. And it made it, and for me, it was a huge, it had a huge impact on my training to have the experience to sit with people and be there to support other people in, this kind of supervised context, like this supported context, where, So, I mean, did people coming there in the Vital program, did you see that like the people that were coming and doing this for the first time, either facilitating or gaining experience with taking the medicine for the first time, did they note that this was affecting how they would be as practitioners at all?
Yeah, what was interesting for me is that some of the students that were there, and they actually came to this experiential retreat to have the psychedelic experience themselves, and not necessarily to hold space. This was something that we defined later on. At the end of the retreat, they told that actually it was not their own psychedelic experience that was the most impactful thing that happened there. It was how they held space for another person, and that there they found a quality within themselves that they didn't even know they had. And the experience of being there for another person meant so much, even though of course it was in this context that they were having supervision from the experienced guides like me. And it felt, this feels different by itself. But what we try to provide is a safe container, not just for the person who is journeying, but for the space holder as well, to experience how it is to hold space. And I think that was one of the things that was really unique about the Amsterdam retreat, is that legally we were able to do that here and allow people to have this type of experience here that sometimes it might be difficult to have somewhere else.
Thank you. I think we're almost out of time. So that was a really good point to reflect on. That experience is both holding space for other, but also going through your own inner space as well. Those two are like maybe the two key general experiences. And Dominique, there was one thing as well I know we wanted to throw in. So maybe it was Janice Phelps's famous article looking at the kind of the core abilities and characteristics, qualities of a practitioner in the psychedelic space. So proficiency in complementary techniques, transpersonal awareness, self-awareness and ethical integrity, knowledge of the physical and psychological effects of psychedelics, trust enhancement, and empathetic abiding presence. So go check that out, folks. I'm sorry we don't have time to kind of dive into each one of those, but yeah, that was something we felt like it was important to include in, like, these are some of the skills that we've got. I feel like it's time to say adieu for now. Thanks for being here, both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was a lovely conversation. Just flowed effortlessly. Before we say toodaloo, can I ask both of you just to let folks know if they want to hear more from you, or read more about you, or kind of connect with you, where would they find you in this wonderful world? Maybe Dominique, if you want to jump in.
Sure. My website is drmorisano.com, drmorisano.com, or I'm on Twitter at Dr. Morisano. Same spelling. It's probably where I'm most active.
Yeah, for me right now, I'm in the process of building my own website, which probably will have my name as well, jessika.com. But I would say it's easier for people to find me if they just go to the educational platform womenonpsychedelics.org. And if they reach out through there, I read all of the emails. So yeah, that would be a great way to contact me.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for listening, folks. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.